Should I buy or sell a house in an election year? This is a huge question that people are having because the stock market can be tremendously affected by who's elected president. But is that actually true for real estate? Just earlier today, I had a super successful buddy of mine on my podcast, and he's like, oh yeah, like I'm not buying real estate this year because, it's an election year. I was like, bro, you have 100 doors. Why are you behaving like consumers? Like, I get that consumers don't get it, but you're a professional investor. Well, today we're actually gonna look at the stats of what's happened in the last 30 years with real estate on election years. Another presidential election is almost here, and many people are hesitant to buy real estate. Not only because of high prices and high interest rates, but because of the potential effect of the election on the US housing market. Now, this is actually a particular interest to me because I love studying cycles, namely the Kondratiev cycle, economic cycles, really studying what happens to the real estate housing market, specifically when the stock market tanks. And when you actually look at the last 5 tankings of the stock market, real estate did correlate with 2 of those 5, but on the other 3, it actually didn't. Begging the question, are they even really related to each other? Well, this pattern is fact. It is common that every election, that the general uncertainty caused by an election year pushes many potential homebuyers to the sidelines. And they basically say, I'm going to wait and see. But housing economists say there's little evidence that elections, either the run up to them or the results, actually affect home values. That assertion is underscored by the following stats. While there's a persistent notion that presidential elections hamper the housing market, recent history tells a different story. The US Census Bureau actually tracks nationwide appreciation of the real estate market over the last 65 years. And it's important to note that on an average year, real estate nationwide goes up 4.65% every single year. So it begs the question, is it doing more or less than that in an election year versus non-election year? Well, there have been 9 elections since 1987. Contrary to what many would expect, home price appreciation in those years actually outpaced appreciation in the 28 non-election years. Case-Shiller actually produced the data and the report for this, showing that on average, home prices have climbed 4.84% in election years since 1987, and in non-election years rose by 4.44%. In other words, over the last 65 years, if we're averaging nationwide 4.65, on an election year, it's slightly higher by 0.2%, and it's slightly lower in non-election years by 0.2%. In other words, in an election year, real estate, if anything, historically actually goes up just a little bit. Now, is there actually a correlation between election years and real estate? The worst year for the housing market in recent decades was by far 2008, right? This is the Great Recession. It is the worst recession we've seen since the Great Depression in the 1930s. And home values plunged 12% that year, according to Case-Shiller. And that had little to do with Barack Obama's battle with John McCain. Like, you understand that we started having these heartbeat loans after this huge run-up since 2004. And basically, people got greedy, banks got greedy, everyone wanted to do more real estate, facilitate more real estate, lend more real estate. And what did we do? We started building homes for which there was no demand. And the value of real estate is only worth what someone's willing to pay, what the perception of the market is. And if you have too many homes and you don't have enough buyers, then there's no one there to actually buy the real estate, which means that the perception of the value goes down dramatically. Which is why in 2008, we literally had an oversupply of too much real estate, and it would take 5 years of selling off the excess inventory before we would actually get to equilibrium, and then we could actually start having demand that outpaced supply. And we've been in that problem since 2014, where there's been a greater demand for more real estate than we've been able to provide, leading up to our historic problem right now. We are missing 7.2 million single-family homes in this country right now. Meanwhile, one of the best years for home prices was 2004, just 4 years prior. Home values soared 13.4%, a result that was most likely due to the inflating housing bubble, not George W. Bush's re-election that year. Interestingly, in 2004, the market surges 13.4%, but in 2008 corrects 12%, and yet we've got this national average over 65 years of actually just growing 4.65%. What that tells me is that when we have years of massive appreciation, which means that in years when you actually have really high appreciation, like think of the year 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic, we saw a surge in prices. In fact, if we go back 4 years, the national average was around $285,000, and today it's sitting at a whopping over $430,000, which means that if we have a shortage of homes, 7.2 million homes, by the time supply has caught up with demand, We could be sitting for a really big correction, but it might take us a decade before we get there. Now, the best year for home values since 1987 came in 2021. Values soared 18.9% that year amid record low mortgage rates and the whole pandemic housing boom. Not because it was Joe Biden's first year in office. These were very, very different dynamics. Historically, the housing market doesn't tend to look very different in presidential election years compared to other years. Chief economist at Bright MLS said that historically, the housing market doesn't tend to look very different in presidential years compared to other years. And then went on to say, it's really about demographics and ultimately the economy, and in most cases, supply and demand. So if you've been sitting on the sidelines thinking, I've been ready for a housing move, but I'm kind of waiting to see what happens with the election year, don't wait anymore. You need to understand the different things that actually do affect the housing prices. Home values are driven by a combination of factors, including the availability of supply of housing, the demand for those homes, and the trajectory of mortgage rates. Election years are no such factor. For example, let's compare single-family homes where we're missing 7.2 million homes, and let's compare it to what supply and demand actually looks like in multifamily. Right now, multifamily is suffering in a really big way because it's actually overbuilt. So the developers out there have said, oh, we have a housing crisis. Let's actually just build more multifamily. But I got news for you. We don't have a demand for that. What we have a demand for is single family. On top of that, you have these presidential candidates that stress their economic plans. But economists generally agree that presidents have little to no influence over a market as broad as the U.S. housing sector. New home construction, unemployment, interest rates, and a multitude of other factors are far more important with what's actually happening than the national political scene. So, drumroll please. Should I buy or sell a house in an election year? If you're considering buying or selling a home, there's essentially no reason to let campaign season change your plans. If you work for a federal agency or you might lose your job if the incumbent loses, then the election maybe affects your finances a little bit. But for most Americans, the outcome of election will have little to direct impact on their income, and therefore you can safely ignore national politics while making your real estate decisions. On the other hand, there is a huge reason to get into the real estate arena right now. When you are missing 7.2 million homes and rates drop, prices are going to skyrocket. So if you've got jealousy over people that bought real estate in 2020 and 2021 and their houses went up $50,000 to $100,000 in value thinking, uh-oh, I missed the boat. I wish I could have gotten back in on that. Well, I got good news for you. With this great of a demand for missing single-family homes, potentially taking a decade before we supply all of them, as rates come down and you see those prices go up, you've got an opportunity to get in on some of those pandemic years of real estate value increases. If I were you, I would be buying a lot of real estate right now. I know what you're thinking, Kris, I have a home. Like, why would I buy more than one homes? Well, if you're a subscriber on my channel, you probably already know the answer to that question, which is this. When you get to retirement, the average retirement fund of 401k and IRA is going to have $254,000 in it. And that's basically enough for 3 years of living based on current standard of living at age 65. Real estate, on the other hand, today across the board, 2024, the average equity position is $299,000. Which bottom line means that when you go to retirement, you actually have more equity in your home than you do have in your retirement account. Making you maybe wonder at that point, why didn't I buy 5 more homes? I'd be a millionaire right now. I might even be a multi-millionaire had I chosen that path, which is also why 90% of millionaires make their money in the game of real estate. Now you might be thinking, Kris, I don't really know how to find good deals. I don't know how to evaluate them. I don't know the first thing about that business. And the last thing I want to do is become a landlord. So is there like a shortcut to getting in that game? And the answer is yes. You don't have to go it alone, and you don't even have to do it at all. There are ways to invest in real estate without ever getting your hands dirty. If you're interested in a more passive approach, or if you like real estate and you're like, I do want to get my hands dirty, click the link below and request a free game plan. This is where I'm going to step into your shoes and say, all right, if I was stuck with your financial situation and we did Freaky Friday switcheroo and I'm now you and you are now me, and I've got to become a millionaire, a multimillionaire as quickly as I can again, based on your situation, then I'm going to show you step by step exactly how I would get there. Hopefully it gives you broadened perspective on what a multimillionaire would do in your situation. If you'd like to get that game plan for free, this knowledge is powerful. Click the link below, request a free game plan, let me show you. And let's just say for a moment that you are interested in becoming a millionaire through the game of real estate. The next thing you have to concern yourself is that famous adage, location, location, location. And I do not mean invest in your backyard. There are actually places to passively invest in the game of real estate that will earn you likely way more money than where you live. And if you want to know where I invest in real estate and also how it's fully automated, click right here. Let me show you.